Now that we have some background on the invention of cinema, we're going to start to discuss specific films and the artistic choices that filmmakers make. That is, we're going to talk about style. And over the next few lectures, we're going to be building up a vocabulary to help us do just this, to talk about style. So we'll primarily be discussing style in three formal ways in regards to mise en scène, cinematography, and editing. And we'll define all these terms as we go along. But for now, we can speak in a shorthand way about them, roughly describing each of them. Mise en scène will be the stylistic choices made in regards to what's in the image. It'll be the elements of cinema and the movies that overlap with theater. Cinematography will be the choices one makes with the camera, how to shoot and how to frame that theatrical image. And editing will refer to the choices made in the arrangement of segments of film, how they're connected one to another. And we're going to begin with mise en scène and talk about it in relationship to Edison Company's early films, which are really, really simple films. And in that way, they'll kind of bring to the surface some of the qualities of mise en scène in a very stark way. Mise en scène is a French term that translates to what is put in the image. As I've just said, we can think about it as the elements of the image that overlap with theater. So it refers to the properties of the cinematic image that are independent of the camera, of camera position, of camera movement, and of editing. So what's in here is lighting, costumes, makeup, sets, props, actors and their quality or style of acting. These make up mise en scène. So as you can see, we could discuss a live theatrical performance in these same ways. When we get to talking about cinematography and editing, this will become impossible. When thinking about mise en scène, we can ask ourselves a question about how those theatrical elements affect what we see and think. How do sets create meaning and meaningful environments? How do props help to tell the story? How do acting and performance style function in relationships to the other objects in the frame? How are bodies and behaviors also objects within the frame? How does lighting evoke meaning and mood? Or how do costumes help us understand a character? So we have a little mise en scène in this room right now, right? If you look around my office, which is obviously where I'm recording these, you get a sense of me as a character probably. Based on the way I'm dressed, you can make assumptions about where I work and what I'm like based on the props in the room. You can see, my messy bookshelves behind me. They are disordered. They're not neat and all in a row. We have the requisite, kind of sad office plant here. You can see that the wall behind me and to the side are cinder block brick, right? I'm in an institutional building, probably not a fancy private college, but a large university, right? A state school, probably. We get this window coming in here that's tilted upward to the sky. You can tell that I'm on the top floor of a building, probably. You can get senses of environments and things like that based on what you see in the frame. You can see I'm wearing a ring. You can see I have my apple and my lunch next to me. You can see these little details that help you flesh out a character. I'm someone who's eating at my desk. I'm someone who works in a big institution. I'm a little disorganized, right? You can make those assumptions based on me and what you see in this room. In this course, we'll be watching films that very dramatically engage in all elements of mise en scène. So while the first few things we'll be looking at will be these simple films by Edison, in a few weeks, for example, we will talk about German Expressionism, and we'll look at The Cabinet of Dr. Caligari, a horror film which contains incredibly elaborate sets that are painted at odd angles and skewed perspectives that create an unsettling parallel universe. The characters themselves are painted like the sets with big shadows under their eyes. They act in over-the-top and dramatic ways that seem to match the sets and their costumes. We get in this film a totally constructed world in which all the elements of mise en scène are working together to create a dark, scary, disorienting, parallel universe. Spike Lee's Do the Right Thing, too, takes mise-en-scène to an exceptionally refined place. He shoots on the streets in Brooklyn, but repainted a few blocks of the Bedford-Stuyvesant neighborhood in ultra-saturated, vibrant colors to create an atmosphere that he needed, an equally vibrant community that, too, had reached its saturation point as it starts to boil over from gentrification, from racial tensions, and from the sweltering summer heat. The characters in this ensemble cast are all dressed in very particular ways as well, and their specific costumes are carefully curated so that we can read a character's identity on his or her body. This character, Radio Rahim, wears a t-shirt bearing the name of his neighborhood and indicates a kind of local pride and attachment. He has rings that read love and hate, and he uses these to act out internal struggles as well as to illustrate the opposing tactics of various civil rights activists. And his boombox, this prop that he carries around, and which gives him his name, Radio Rahim, is synonymous with his identity, of his ability to occupy space, both physically and sonically. And it'll eventually become an object that sparks a confrontation that leaves the whole neighborhood changed forever. So we can think about mise-en-scène in really kind of detailed ways, analyzing what we see. And when we think about mise-en-scène, we'll be discussing how what might seem like subtle or casual choices by the filmmaker and the other people involved in the film actually serve to shape the viewer's understanding of the scene, what's happening, and our emotional relationship to it. Props, costumes, sets, lighting, and acting are exceptionally important to any film. When Nicole Kidman won her Oscar for her portrayal of the moody modernist author Virginia Woolf in The Hours, the joke was that she had won by a nose, since the makeup and costumes were so integral to believing that the plucky Australian actress was the suicidal novelist. So this prosthetic nose that she won was partially what was able to transform her, not just her performance and her comportment in her body, but the actual bits of mise-en-scène that were added to her and to her performance helped us see her as someone else. Any performance that comes off well is in part due to elements of mise-en-scène. Sometimes the work of mise-en-scène is so effective we don't even think about all the conscious and highly detailed choices that were made to make a film seem realistic or natural. Two films shot in the same city can be starkly different. One can be dingy and menacing, the other shiny and glamorous. Even when the scene doesn't seem particularly intentional or doesn't call attention to itself, this is a kind of realism that has a message too. We're encouraged to see the scene as truthful and neutral and real. We might even forget that these aren't real people and that we're not flies on the wall. Mise-en-scène is important because it defines our place in the physical world. It tells us about the material and phenomenal conditions of the surrounding world. This surrounding world may be from the ancient past or from the future, or may even be located on another planet. It tells us about these worlds, whether they're polluted or perfect, scary or safe, and so on. These things are communicated to us through sets and objects and the people within them, not just through the dialogue that's spoken. So now when we turn to Edison's early films to discuss mise-en-scène, you might initially react by thinking, like, what mise-en-scène? These early films are pared down and super simple, but that doesn't mean that nothing is happening or that these restrained choices don't tell us a lot. The films we're going to watch were all recorded in Edison's movie studio called the Black Maria, which was a little open-roof black tar paper studio on railroad tracks so it can turn and follow the sun. It wasn't designed to be glamorous or interesting, but super functional at capturing good images in bright light. What follows is a selection of Edison's early films, most of which would have originally played in the kinetoscope on those individual viewers we talked about. We'll watch them once through and then single out a few for more detailed analysis. They're very short and they go by very fast, so rewind and rewatch if you need to. When thinking about mise-en-scène, think about the props, the costume, the lighting, the acting, and makeup, and how these affect what we see. Let's start with that first film, The Kiss. This film was a big popular success for Edison. It ran in the kinetoscopes, but also had a popular projection run as well a little bit later. It starred two vaudeville celebrities, Mae Irwin and John C. Rice, who were famous for a theatrical production called The Widow Jones. Edison had seen this play and loved it, and he asked them to reenact this lingering kissing scene for camera. The film was considered scandalous at the time, offensive even, pornographic, disgusting. Religious groups wanted the film banned because of its portrayal of low morals and what might happen to the people who watch it. It made both actors into even bigger stars. Mae Irwin, who was kind of the bigger name at the time, had actually replaced Rice with another actor because she thought he made her look old. But then she hired him back for the theatrical runs because he had become such a huge sex symbol and heartthrob. It's a super simple film, which hopefully didn't offend any of your morals. Certainly times have changed tremendously. The simplicity of these films will make them both easy and difficult to talk about. Remember, we want to try to limit ourselves to thinking about mise-en-scène, those theatrical elements of the scene. We can describe what Edison does with the camera, but remember, that's cinematography. So to quickly get that out of the way, we can say a few things in the negative. In The Kiss, in terms of cinematography, there's only one shot. It doesn't move or reframe. And in terms of editing, there's no edit. So at least for now, we can push that out of our mind. In regards to mise-en-scène, there's not a lot to talk about here either, or so it might seem. The first thing I want to point out is that this is a silent film. Earlier you heard music playing under the films, and all of these early films were silent. We'll talk about the invention of sound in cinema later, but when these films were projected, that is when they weren't on a kinetoscope, typically there was someone playing piano to accompany the film. So the music wasn't connected to the film in any way. Different songs could be played each time or no music at all. So what we see here, a man and a woman, both nicely dressed, right? That's mise-en-scène, implying that they're middle-class people. They're in a shallow, artificial space. It's just a black wall behind them. There's no effort to make this look like a scene, a home or a bedroom or a park. They're just putting their actions on display. They're in natural light and they're very evenly lit. There's no harsh or moody shadows. The scene and the lighting seem quite consciously composed to put the figures and their acting and those things just on display, and only those things. We might describe their acting as a bit over the top too, big gestures, the twirling of mustaches, and so on. But remember, this is some of the first times that anyone has acted on film. Prior to this, they would have been on a stage and far away from their audiences. Gestures had to be big to be seen. Actors will have to get used to being seen up close, and we'll see acting over time adjust to the closeness of cinematography. We see the two of them nuzzling their faces together and talking into each other's lips before the big kiss. So this establishes intimacy. This is not a stolen kiss or surprise. It has a long romantic lead-up. By giving such a simple and uncomplicated film, Edison stresses the main event here, the kiss, yes, but also in some ways his invention, the machine that can record life in this super accurate way. When we see these people in all of their detail, we can read their gestures and their body language, their intimacy, their clothing. We can really kind of get into the granularity of who they are. Something else we might notice is that they're not pretending the camera isn't there. They're performing for the camera, for us. This big mustache twirl seems more for us than for her, a dramatic lead-up to the big moment. What we have here is what film scholar Tom Gunning calls the cinema of attractions. In this essay, Gunning argues that early cinema was less a way of telling stories than of presenting a series of views to an audience, fascinating because of their illusory power and exoticism. He will call this early conception of cinema the cinema of attractions. What is the cinema of attraction? First, it is a cinema that bases itself on its ability to show something. This is an exhibitionist cinema. An aspect of early cinema is the relationship it constructs with its spectator, the recurring look at the camera by the actors. This action, which is later perceived as spoiling the realistic illusion of cinema, is here undertaken with brio, establishing a connection with the audience. From comedians smirking at the camera to the constant bowing and gesturing of the conjurers in magic films, This is a cinema that displays its visibility, willing to rupture the self-enclosed fictional world for a chance to solicit the attention of the spectator. And certainly we see this in the other Edison films as well. The next little bit is called The Serpentine Dances. Surely the first thing you noticed here was that we see color. Just like the sound, this is added in afterwards. No color film existed for motion pictures at this time. We'll talk about that in a few weeks. This is a hand-painted film, meaning that someone went in and painted with a paintbrush every single film frame. And as you can see, what we get here are big washes of color, mainly filling in the shape of the woman's body. So this isn't actually part of the mise-en-scène, since it wasn't there in front of the camera, and it wasn't done with a camera, so it isn't part of cinematography either. It's done in what we would now call post-production. This is sort of an early special effect, and for our purposes, we'd put it in the editing category, or things that are done to the material surface of film. So in terms of mise-en-scène, we have something very similar to The Kiss, but even more dramatically on display as a cinema of attractions. The first woman on the screen is dressed in a really kind of outlandish costume. That's part of the mise-en-scène. She has antennae and fairy wings and shoes with bows on them and a flowy skirt that she holds in her hands and tosses and lifts as she dramatically kicks her legs in the air. She faces the camera and she's smiling. She's showing off her moves and the way that the camera can catch them. We get wonderful detail and dramatic motion in her skirts. As Gunning put it, what we have here is cinema showing us what it can do. It can capture fast movement. It can show us detailed costumes. It can record with utter accuracy and delight whatever is in front of the lens. Something happens in the middle of this little film. We actually get a cut. This is the first cut we've seen. It's just an in-camera action. They've stopped the camera, switched the actors, and then turned on the camera again to start filming again. So while dramatic, this is a bit of editing. It's not mise-en-scène. With the cut, we see a new person suddenly on screen, and she has an even more exotic costume with huge swirling sleeves that create amazing shapes and motion. She's looking straight on at the camera, demonstrating what she can do, but at the same time making an occasion for showing the amazing properties of Edison's new invention. The next bit, which shows Sandow, the bodybuilder, we get more of the same. We could start to make some generalizations here about Edison's early films and style. We could say in these early films that he used simple or even non-existent sets, elaborate costumes, natural lighting, and very obvious acting or performance directly for the camera. In other early films by Edison, we'll see Sioux tribal dancers or sharpshooter Annie Oakley putting holes through pennies and other really beautiful novelties. He gives us film as a capturing of movement and image, plain and simple. We're not encumbered by anything fancy. Even if we were to venture from discussing just mise-en-scène, we'd still describe Edison's early work kind of in the negative. No camera movement, no editing, or minimal edits. So we get a real focus on the person in the frame, how they're dressed, how they're acting, their body, these details of a person that the camera is capturing in incredible accuracy and showing movement. And so we really have kind of just a laser sharp focus on the people, on the figures, and what they're doing for you, the spectator. Here's another early work that we're going to watch through and where we get a bit of change. We still have the 0 degree of cinematography and editing, but we get some new elements. We're still in that weird nowhere, black space, but now we have some props. An effort's been made to make this look like an actual place, like a barber shop. Only the barest things are needed to do this: a striped barber pole, a chair, a sign, and then we have some men dressed like people on a normal day, a barber in a white smock, and even just with these little details, we can believe it as a place. While we still don't have intentional camera movement, there's some bouncing from its operation, and no edits, though the clip does run a few times over, we have some new elements. We have kind of two little scenes happening, one in the foreground and one in the background. A man comes into the shop to get a haircut and a shave and promptly receives one. And then there's other two characters, customers, we assume, either just hanging out, as people seem to do in barber shops, or waiting for a cut and a shave too. One of them walks in from off camera. He enters the frame, which of course implies that the scene continues out and off screen. That adds to some of the realism of this. And the man on the right greets him and shows him a story in the paper. He's surprised, excited, and laughs. So they're acting. They're not paying attention to the camera. It's as if we weren't watching, as if they're not doing it for us. In this little example, we can see how very small elements of mise-en-scène, props, sets, or acting, can really transform what's going on. We get something here like a believable little world. We get a narrative. And in the next section, we're going to look at Edison's biggest competitors, the Lumiere brothers in France, who we already met while talking about their beautiful camera and projector. And we'll see how they, too, do similar things to Edison, really highlighting the realism and documentary quality of the image, that it's there to record the world and capture what happens in front of the lens. But we'll see that they take a very different tactic on mise-en-scène to show these same documentary elements.